Welcome to Anything But Ordinary, the podcast that explores the extraordinary world behind the world, the unordinary people and businesses that create the extraordinary bubble around high-profile lives. I am Zoe Jackson, and in each episode I sit down with inspiring individuals, from founders and creators to pioneers and disruptors, who are redefining success and carving out their own paths in business and in life. We dive into the personal challenges, triumphs and turning points that make their journeys anything but ordinary. This show is your reminder that success isn't one size fits all, and life really is anything but ordinary. Hi, Tom Stroud.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
On this podcast of Anything But Ordinary. Obviously, as we've just said, you are the exiting cast member from UK Love is Blind, the first series. You are a communications consultant.
That's right, yeah.
And also kind of very platforming in the mental health space for kind of men and women, understanding men and men's behaviour a bit better.
You nailed it. Yeah. Better than I'd normally do, Zoe. So thank you for that.
Okay. So look, you have, I think the best place to start is kind of Love is Blind, UK.
Yeah.
So obviously that was shot last year.
Mm-hmm.
Aired this summer. I know lots of people actually are still watching it at the moment.
Yeah.
How has it been since you've left the show? So how has it been for the last year?
Well, yeah, obviously we shot it August last year, so it was over a year ago now. And when you're in that bubble, I mean, the main cast were in that bubble for sort of 2 months of filming. So your life gets completely turned upside down with it. And you become used to having a kind of different kind of life where every sort of need and want is catered for by Netflix. So when you come out of it the other end, I think a lot of the cast really struggled to adjust back to normal life again, because you have this weird scenario whereby you then have to go back to your normal life for a year. And with the knowledge that this big thing is coming, August the following year, so the August that's just gone. And it was quite difficult for me to adjust back to normal life again. But imagine for the couples that actually got married. They were married and then had to sort of exist in married life and deal with all the challenges that come with being newlywed, particularly when you've only known someone for a couple of months.
Short amount of time, yeah.
Yeah, but they also couldn't talk to their families. They couldn't tell their whole families that they were married. So like old Uncle Jerry would be like, "Hey, Ben, how's your love life?" And he'd be like, "Yeah, it's all right, Jerry." But he'd actually had a ring on his finger the whole time. So pretty crazy experience.
That is really crazy.
Yeah.
So a lot of the families did not know until the actual episodes came out this year.
Exactly that.
Bonkers. Absolutely bonkers.
Yeah.
In terms of career, though, how was that? Because obviously you went into UK Love is Blind as a communications consultant. I assume working for a company.
Well, I worked for myself.
You were working for yourself?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
But you went in and then you've come out and then kind of continued to work in that world. I guess until the episode was kind of released this year, then things started to change in terms of career.
Yeah. I mean, look, I was quite fortunate because I'd worked in the sort of London PR comms agency scene for about 15 years. And it was only kind of a few months before the show started filming that I sort of took a bit of a change in a different direction in my career, because I'd always been part of that sort of big agency, high octane, adrenaline filled, stressful world, and came to a point in my life a couple of years ago where both my parents were quite unwell at the same time. So my mum and my stepdad. And that sort of kind of forced me, for one reason or another, to slow down a little bit, because I had to spend more time with them and take care of them rather. So that meant that I had to set up a little consultancy business, because I just couldn't do the 60, 70-hour weeks that you need in the agency world. And fortunately, that one of the great things about consultancy and working for yourself is that you have a bit more flexibility. So that allowed me, to take 2 months off for filming, and then when filming finished, pick up a few contracts. But I mean, we'll talk a bit later about job stuff, but it's kind of scary as well doing consultancy, because you're responsible for your own income at the end of the day. You don't get paid a salary. But
absolutely, yeah. It's a very different ballgame to then being employed.
Yeah.
Were you not worried going into UK Love is Blind that, given your career, that it could be damaging and that relationships could break down with people that you'd already been working with, brands and businesses?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a PR person, right? So like reputations. I sort of protect and enhance the reputation of big consumer brands, and one of the things you're always going to be thinking about on a show like that is I could completely damage my own reputation, and within the show, I mean, I didn't have a smooth ride. Like, there were a few very contentious moments with my storyline, and so there was a real risk attached to it, to answer your question. But for me now, sitting here sort of 2-3 months after it aired, like, it's net positive for me, and I'm really, really happy that I did it, even though I didn't get the sort of the fairy tale ending.
Yeah. So you didn't get the fairy tale ending. You went in there looking for love.
Yeah.
So that was the only motive for going on the show? Was it that there was no other motives for going on a show like UK Love is Blind?
It's a totally fair question, and I kind of know where you're going with that, really. Like for me, the idea was particularly pertinent. So the format of the show, because I'd been stuck in this kind of loop of online dating and very fleeting relationships for years before, and had done a lot of work and a lot of internal interrogation to figure out sort of why that kind of format, London dating multiple people at the same time, wasn't working for me. And I'd kind of taken a bit of a break from dating because, I needed to get better at understanding myself, right? And then I got a call from a casting producer, and it had sort of come at an amazing time for me, because I felt like I was ready enough and knew myself well enough to understand exactly the value that I was going to bring into a relationship, and also, more importantly, I guess, what I was looking for in a partner. So So it kind of came at a good time. But I'd be lying to you. I think every cast member would be lying to you if they didn't say you are also interested in the direction that doing something like that is going to take your life.
Take you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've got no desire to be an influencer and get a Boohoo Man deal and do all that kind of stuff. But it has given me a platform. It's given me a platform to talk about the stuff that I care about. And, we can come on to that in a minute. But that's been incredibly rewarding for me. And being able to balance that with my day job, which I love. But, I'd be lying. I think most PR people would be lying if they said it really gives them a lot of sort of purpose and makes them feel like they're putting back good value stuff into the world.
Yeah, I think it's been a complete journey for you. And as you say, I think anyone going into a show probably do recognise or can recognise that the negative stuff that can come out of it. You have to do the assessment of it, I guess, the risk assessment before you go in.
Yeah.
And perhaps the positive side, which is, like you say, now it's given you this incredible platform to be able to be passionate and talk about those things and take your career in a slightly different way, I guess, as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because the career stuff is the career stuff, and the social media content, purpose-driven stuff is that stuff. And there are times when those two worlds merge, and it makes me really happy when they do. So, but they're still few and far between. And the thing I'm figuring out at the moment is trying to find a way longer term to make them merge permanently, right? So, and one of the things I'm thinking about at the moment is some sort of coaching or something like that. And I don't know who for, and I don't know what exactly, but, I spoke to you just before we started shooting about the podcast.
Yes, I was going to mention, because obviously I do follow your Instagram as well.
Thanks very much.
Like a lot of other fans of people. Well, I would say I'm a fan. So you had put out there that you were going to start looking at doing a podcast and really focusing in on women being able to understand men better and men being able to understand themselves better.
Yeah. I mean, look, this all came from the insight I got post-show, which was that, like I've said, I didn't get the easiest ride, and there were things that I needed to really be accountable for on that show. But one of the things that I was proud of is that I was always very honest about who I was and what my values were, even if they didn't necessarily align with the audience or my fiance. So, and the reason why I know those things is because I've had years of difficulty where I've really not known who I was, what I stood for, what my values were, and I've had to figure that stuff out for myself. So, post-show, I started posting. It all kicked off by, we did a press junket with a woman called Michelle Ellman, who's a life coach.
Okay.
She's amazing. She's awesome. And if she's watching, hopefully she is. Big up Michelle, because she's awesome. And she came to this press junket that we did. We did 17 media interviews, me and a few of the other guys. It was tough. It was long. You're getting asked the same questions, And then she came along, and the first thing she said was, Tom, when we shot the reunion episode, you had mentioned that someone on a stag do had called you feminine, right? And you didn't see that as a negative or an affront to your masculinity. You saw that as a positive thing. And I just want you to explain that a bit more in this press junket. And I explained it. And I said that, you know, the way that I was raised and the traits that I have as a human being sometimes can lend themselves to femininity a bit more. And obviously this was a big part of my whole storyline, right? Was traditional masculinity versus modern masculinity.
Yeah.
And I explained myself. She then clipped it up, put it on social, and it just blew up. And it made me realise that for a lot of men in particular, they don't know who they are. And that makes them struggle when they're in relationships romantically, when they're in work relationships, when they're in relationships with their friends and their family. And so I just started putting out more stuff around that, really, around male behaviour in dating and relationships, you know, men's relationships with themselves and their inner child and all this stuff that I've learned through therapy and counselling and all that kind of stuff. And that's just sort of how it's taken me.
People are interested in it. They are, you know, and I think people are much more interested as well about, you know, kind of looking at themselves and getting therapy and going to get that kind of support.
Yeah.
How long have you been going to therapy for?
Oh, God, 6 years.
Okay, so it goes back, like, so it's not something recent post the show.
No. I think the thing with therapy is everyone needs a catalyst or a reason to start it. And more often than not, they're not good reasons. They're because people have a life event or they feel like they're at rock bottom, and that's the thing that forces them into it. But for me, the time when I've got the most out of therapy has been when I felt really good and felt really positive, because then rather than dealing with immediate topics, events in your life, traumas or whatever, you're able to take a step back and think about the building blocks of who you are as a person, and think about, you know, certain really ingrained behaviours or you know, ways that you act or you interact with other people, and think, well, where does that stuff come from? And you have to be in a pretty good place to really do that work and interrogate yourself.
Absolutely. And I think it's the same when you get life coaching as well. You've got to be in the right place for that kind of support and that kind of therapy, coaching.
Exactly.
Talking about who you are and what's ingrained in you, one of the things that came up, obviously there were a few things that became quite controversial or talking points within the show, was your view on, and you know, I'm sure you've been spoken about it loads, you've been asked about it loads, your view on Maria's career. And you have kind of articulated that and said it's more than just a view on the career. It was more what you perceived as her ambition. Is that something you feel, you know, still now, like is it inherent in you, like when you meet people, that actually is something that you do look at and value and perceive as part of that person? Or has that changed? Has that experience changed your view? Yeah,
kind of both, really. So like the first thing, and the thing which I reflected on a lot post that conversation, post show, etc., was that I have certain judgments, right? Everyone has judgments, but my judgment around that in particular was something that I didn't think was fair, and it forced me to do quite a lot of work to figure out where those judgments come from, right?
Yeah.
And you know, when I really, really drilled down into that stuff, that judgment is as a result of my own values and, you know, ambition and wanting to create a better life for myself than we did as children, me and my little brother, right? So, but that forced me to become quite defensive, I think, about my own life, and also expect that because I think a certain way, other people are going to think that way too. And the realization I had post that conversation was that it's okay, like that people have different priorities in their lives. So
that's right, yeah.
And I think in retrospect, I should have been firstly a bit improve my own knowledge around that industry, because I'd made a judgment based off an assumption which wasn't fair. So, and secondly, be more accepting of the fact that people have different priorities, right? So, and for Maria in particular, she's someone that really, really hones in on her family values and spending as much time with her family as she can. So,
which is an amazing value.
Absolutely, absolutely is. So, and that's not to say that I don't have that value, but you know, I also have other values which input how I spend my time and my energy, right? So,
but it's a controversial thing to talk about. It did it raised that debate, and I would say, you know, whilst watching it and also kind of looking at the feedback and the conversations around it, I think I've always sat on the side of, if I am dating or if I'm meeting someone, I like to know, not necessarily, do we align professionally, but actually do you have ambition? For me, that's really a kind of key and important thing. And I've had people push back on me and say, but that's not everything. And I would always kind of come back and say, well, I appreciate it's not everything, but that's part for me of the package of what I would be looking for.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Exactly. That's exactly it. So I think you can be accepting that someone's different to you, but also understand that in retrospect, maybe they're not going to make a good partner for you because you have different goals, ambitions.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, absolutely.
And that was one of my realizations it really made me think about the whole idea of ambition, because I think people look at ambition in a very sort of binary way, where they're like, ambition means earning loads of money, and it doesn't.
No, it doesn't. No, I agree. I don't think it does. I think you can be doing something, like you could be, working as, I don't know, let's think of something. But a job that can be deemed as a pretty basic kind of job that is not kind of in the financial market or working in the city. But actually, you might have an ambition to do something else. Maybe it's photography, or maybe it's something something creative, or whatever it might be. But you're proactively doing that. Then I think that's
exactly that's incredibly attractive to me.
Yeah,
like is having that drive, whatever your goal or your ambition might be. And let's say, really good example, right? My ambition is to not work for my whole life. My ambition is to buy a camper van, do it up, and spend a year traveling around Europe, right? So, and if that is your ambition or your goal, or one of, then you think, well, what's it going to take for me to get there? And for me to get there, I need to have financial security or enough money to afford to take a year off work. And so that then dictates that if I'm trying to find a partner, firstly, I'd really love it if my partner found or had that shared ambition, or thought that was a cool idea because we could do it together, and that'd be a dream. And then secondly, like, I don't know, I mean, this was another thing that I got a lot of flack over, like that I wasn't a provider, right? That I wasn't able to provide and support my partner financially. And
well, it's not that you weren't able to; it's that you felt that it needed to be a bit more of a fair contribution. Equal,
exactly.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's okay that people have differing views of men and women in relationships. But for me personally, I want somebody who's also going to contribute financially to those shared goals and ambitions. Right?
Yeah.
So,
right. And that's okay. And that's fine. And that's good.
So.
I'm glad the conversations happen, because I think lots of people kind of sit on the same bench, and it's good to have these conversations anyway.
Yeah.
So we started talking a bit about love now and dating.
Yeah.
I'm sure you get asked this as well all the time. Are you dating?
I'm dipping my toe back into it slowly.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, honestly, it's just... I'm trying to say this in as humble a manner as I can, but like when you're on a show like that, it does expose you to a lot of people, you know.
Yeah.
So,
I was going to say the pool must be huge now.
Yeah.
Which does that make it more complicated?
Yeah, it really does. It really does. And that's not saying that I'm not grateful. I'm incredibly grateful for that level of exposure, but it certainly doesn't make it any easier, I guess.
No.
So
no. Okay.
Yeah, it's something which...
You're dipping your toes.
Yeah, exactly.
Having a feel and seeing what works. Maybe.
Yeah, this is it. Yeah. It's, But the great thing about doing a show like that is it does, like I say, force you to reanalyze exactly what you're looking for in a partner. So now I think I've got a pretty clear view, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's funny. It's like there's two sides to that argument, because it's good to know what you're looking for, but equally one of my things that I talk about a lot is like, we'll be a bit more open-minded in terms of what you're looking for.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what the key is.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. I mean, I think that one of the challenges always is, for example, when people are dating, is the dating apps that are out there. They kind of click, swipe left, swipe right.
Yeah.
Like you say, we are judging based purely on a surface.
Yeah.
Without meeting that person. So how now, with your experience, would you be able to form a genuine connection? Do you think you've really been able to kind of harness that? Now you're dipping back into dating?
I mean, look, to answer the first part of your question, like, I don't think the dating apps are the problem. I think it's the way that people are using them that's the problem, right? Dating apps.
I heard the Sunday night one. Yeah, don't
go
on.
Don't
go
the
on
lonely
Apple.
Sunday, where you're like,
don't
you just
start looking at it Sunday night.
So I think that's the problem. I've spoken about this on podcasts before. You have this, I call it the fallacy of choice, right? Which is like they're supposed to increase your options, which in turn should mean that you're more likely to find someone that fits your criteria. But in fact, what it does is it gives you too much choice. And I did a bunch of research for this, because I'm sort of chatting to Bumble at the moment about doing some work with them. And, and this is a sociological problem whereby a generation ago or 2 generations ago, people would exist in these small communities, right? Didn't have the internet. So the way that you'd meet someone typically would be down the pub, through your mates, through work. So
or introduce, like traditional matchmaking.
Yeah. Can you introduce me to your mate, or do you have any hot mates you can intro me with?
Yeah.
The amazing thing about a scenario like that is that it forces people, and men in particular, because I think men are more guilty of bad behaviour on dating apps than women are. Not solely, but probably skews a bit heavily towards men. It forces you to be accountable. So if you've introduced me to your best mate, right, and we're going on a date and I don't vibe with her, I have to be incredibly forthright and honest about why I don't like that person, and tell them, because if I don't, I've got Zoe to deal with, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'll be after you.
Yeah, exactly. This is it. Whereas on dating apps, you're meeting a stranger, so if you're not vibing it, you just disappear.
Yeah.
You know? And the other problem with dating apps,
Ghosting,
exactly, this is it. It's ghosting. It's a big topic. Tune into the podcast for more on that. But it is that when you have this choice, you always have this next option. And so you might go on a date with someone that's like, I don't know, a 7 out of 10 date, but you didn't like the way that they drunk their pina colada. And then you're like, well...
They call that the ick, don't they?
Oh, yeah, I mean...
You get the ick.
Yeah, we talk about the ick a lot on my social media.
Okay.
It's funny. It's 'cause that even this terminology didn't exist. And the thing about when you dated a generation ago was that you give people more of a chance, I think, and people are more open-minded. So.
Absolutely. We had an amazing woman called Olivia Rigg on, and she's actually, she's a matchmaker to the top 0.1%. So, and she just
like
deals
high net
with men.
worth
So,
vibe.
right. Billionaires. But they come to her when they're obviously, of course, probably time short anyway.
Yeah.
And they're probably travelling a lot. And so they probably don't have a lot of time to waste, but they may or may not have used apps. And they'll come to her when they're genuinely ready to settle down. And she'll introduce them to like 2, max 3 people.
Yeah.
And she's got like such a high success rate. I think it's like 99.9%.
Wow.
That it will be successful, because she says it's like traditional matchmaking.
Yeah.
You know, you're not in this massive pool. You're not having all these options. They have to really focus in and concentrate on those connections. So it's interesting, but it can't always apply. We haven't all got millions and millions of pounds to go and spend on
we don't.
matchmaking.
but I think this is another trend which I see a lot, is that I think it's amazing she's built up a base of men in particular that have that level of intentionality when it comes to dating. Because again, my view is that women go into dating with a lot more intent than men do. And so, I did some work with an organisation called Board of Dating Apps a few weeks ago, and they hold these singles events, right? Which,
I think someone's telling me about that.
Yeah,
okay.
And they're amazing, and they're really well curated, and they have these hosts that make sure that people are treating each other respectfully, that break the ice, that intro people to each other, and they sell out women's tickets within 48 hours of them going on sale. With guys, they're trying to pick guys off the street the day of these events to go, because guys just aren't willing to do that and aren't willing to put themselves out there because they think it's a bit cringe, or they're like, oh no, I'm not really, I don't want to go to a dating event which is purely created around finding a partner. Because I don't know, there's a reticence from guys.
Yeah, and I think also if you've got like an app that you can just, why would you?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So.
Okay. Talking about men then, understanding, because this is what we're just chatting about, men understanding men and their own behaviours. What is kind of like the most common thing that you get asked about a lot, or what do you think one of the biggest issues are out there for men or for women dealing with men in the dating world?
So the trend, the question I get asked about more than anything else is about avoidant men as a topic.
I know one of those.
Plenty of them, particularly as you get older, because all the secure attached guys are coupled off. So it's just us avoidance left, right?
Yeah.
But and I say us because I am an avoidant man. That is my attachment style. And I suppose the difference, without meaning to blow my own trumpet, is that I understand where that behaviour
you recognise
comes from.
it.
Exactly.
Now.
That's the thing. And once you get an understanding of it, it means that when your typical avoidant tendencies or traits crop up in dating, you can recognise them and be like, oh, that's actually not the person, it's me. The reason why I'm feeling like I want to pull away now is because that person's asked me to express something which I'm scared to express, right? So something which makes me feel vulnerable, and I don't want to show that to them because I'm worried that they're going to take it and hurt my feelings in the future with it.
What do you think the answer to that is then? Because I think we're getting much better at speaking about kind of not just mental health, but talking about maybe going to therapy and getting some help in that space.
Yeah.
but that's kind of very, I guess, surface.
Yeah.
So for someone for them to understand they've got an avoidant attachment style would be digging a bit deeper, perhaps, and going to seek support for like childhood. Does it always come from kind of childhood trauma?
Predominantly, but it can also come from adult relationships, in particular romantic relationships. So let's say if, as a guy, you have invested heavily in a romantic partner and trusted them, and I mean, a romantic relationship is probably the deepest level of relationship that you're going to get, right? If you're with someone and they're your day one, your ride or die, you trust them with everything. They've seen you in the worst state you can possibly be in. Yeah. And that person then breaks up with you for whatever reason.
Yeah, hard.
That's really difficult to deal with. And that was, I wasn't avoidant in my 20s, but I went through a difficult breakup, and that's what promoted this avoidant tendency. So, and to tie it back into what I was saying earlier about dating, from that point onwards, when I'd gotten over that relationship, I was going into dates and having these fleeting 2-month relationships, because every time the shit hit the fan and I was like, right, I really need to open up to this person now and show them things about myself which I dislike, my flaws. Yeah. I'd be like, nah, I'm just going to break up with them and find someone else. Present this shiny version of Tom too, you know? Yeah. So, but to answer your question, Zoe, like how people can, and men in particular, can help themselves is difficult, because one of the things, I talk about therapy all the time, right? And therapy has been amazing for me, but it is also something which costs money. Yeah. And, you know, I've been shelling out. I went to therapy every week for 4 years. Yeah. And if I think about the thousands of pounds that costs, it's not accessible to a lot of people. So, I think the first step is, you know, I know it sounds like a cliche, but is understanding the behaviour and understanding your own behaviour as a guy. Yeah. And if you're seeing this trend, I put out a video about love bombing the other day, and I had a few guys, thankfully, because they never put themselves out there, a few guys messaged me saying, fuck, I recognise this behaviour.
They recognise the behaviour in themselves.
In myself. I even had one of the casts call me and tell me that, and I was like, that's amazing, and it's so good. He said it really resonated with me because I see myself in a lot of that stuff.
Well, I think that's what's so great about, for example, the podcast you're going to be doing. Yeah. Because it's almost like an available resource for people that would not necessarily feel that they have the funds. Yeah. So it's very expensive to go to therapy.
I hope so.
Do that.
Yeah, exactly. But again, it's the challenge is that men are often unwilling to admit that they have a problem. So, you know, and so we actually need more women to be more vocal about this stuff. And like, I look at women as allies that can actually take the message that I'm trying to push out and speak to their brothers or their sons or their dads or their mates about it, because it's difficult for a man to take advice from another man, particularly one that's been on a reality TV show. Yeah. So.
Yeah, no, definitely. But I think maybe you're changing that kind of that viewpoint, because I think, as you say, it's hard for a man, maybe down the pub. Yeah. It's like, you're right, mate. You want a beer? How's your day? Good. Like, exactly. That's probably the extent sometimes of that conversation.
How's your new power drill? Yeah. You've done your tyres up on your car. Look at that bird. She's hot.
We're being very stereotypical here, but yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so in like the world that you're in now, where you are exposed on social media, like how do you protect yourself?
It's hard, man. It is. It was the thing that shocked me the most post-show. I work in that world. I mean, you know, my job, like, I work in social media, but doing social media for brands versus a person is completely different, and it's difficult. Like, yeah, if I'm honest with you, it's been the biggest challenge for the show stuff, because you can hear people talk all the time and say, you know, just block it out, ignore the haters, this kind of terminology. But it's really hard, because I care a lot about what other people think. And that's down to my own sort of, I guess, characteristics as a human being, right? I always want to learn, like that's a good trait, but I also do take stuff to heart as well, and that's one of my bad traits. And I mean, I even had one yesterday. I put out a post sort of reflecting on the show, and it got quite a lot of traction, but because of that, you're exposed to a wider audience. Like, you know, I think 500,000 people viewed it, and then means that you get a lot of people that maybe aren't as thoughtful and aren't as caring. The whole post was about being more kind to people on social media, and you get people sending you messages, and I had a few comments, and I actually did something really weird yesterday. I'm not sure how you feel about this, but I had a young Ecuadorian woman comment, and it was that horrible vitriol, and I messaged
Trolling.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I commented back, and I said,
that.
like, I'm so sorry that you feel like this, and I'm so sorry that whatever events have sort of happened to you in your life where you feel like this is the only way you're able to express yourself. I really hope that you're going to be able to get over them. And then she comes back with loads of vitriol, and I was like, wow. Wow, no, I didn't initially. I did something really weird, and I don't know why I'm going to say this in the podcast, but I was like, this is really interesting, and perhaps she actually either needs some help or perhaps she needs someone to reprimand her. So I found her name, I went on Facebook, and I found her, and then I found her mum, and I sent her mum a message.
Oh, you did not
I actually sent her mum a message. And I don't know if that's weird or if it's going to make the cut, but I need to be accountable for that behaviour.
Oh, my goodness. What did you say to her mum? Your daughter is very, very rude.
Yeah, I sent her the screenshots, and I was like, hey, heads up, I've just put out a post about social media trolling, and this was your daughter's response. And
how old was the child? Was it a child? Or?
She was like early 20s, I think. So,
oh, okay. Yeah, an adult responsible for her own
responsible
actions.
adult.
Yeah.
So that was weird. But that was because the whole post was about trolling. And I was like, particularly in this week, with the Liam Payne news and everything else, I was like, people just need to be more considerate and more kind. And that's not to say people can't have an opinion, but opinions are what make us grow as human beings. But
of course, opinions are what we view as the right response, the right thing, doesn't make them factual.
No, exactly.
And that's where I think people take it too far. And social media can be such a negative space,
exactly.
like for the trolling, for the kind of bullying and stuff like that.
Yeah.
As you say, everything that happened with Liam Payne last week, incredibly sad.
Yeah.
But yet there's still so much negativity was going on social media.
This is
about a poor guy that's lost his life.
Exactly. The concept of social media in its purest form should be amazing because it allows you to build communities and connect with anyone that you want. And that if social media wasn't a thing and someone sold you that dream, you'd be like, that sounds incredible. But sadly, because of humans and because of the ways that we tend to behave, people sort of take it in a different direction as well. And if you look at like all the mental health statistics around teenagers in particular, and women, girls, girls are more unhappy than they ever have been, and a big contributory factor is because of social
media. It's just that it's got such a positive. It can be used for such positive, but it can be exceptionally negative just by the aesthetics of how someone should be looking or presenting or what kind of lifestyle other people may or may not be leading. So
this is it. So the insight with girls, in particular teenage girls, is like, when we talk about a generation ago pre-social, right? Girls would benchmark themselves. They'd benchmark how they presented themselves, how they dressed, how they looked, how they behaved against the other girls in their peer group, right? So that meant that they'd look at these girls and they'd be like, okay, well, perhaps I'm not as pretty as my best friend, but, I bring more to the table because I'm funnier. And so it really allowed them to establish themselves in that group dynamic and who they were and what value they bring. And then you have social media suddenly where they're comparing themselves against millions of other people and airbrushed photos of Victoria's Secret models. They don't stand a chance. And that's where it becomes quite dangerous, I think.
Absolutely. Definitely. So, Tom, we've amazing podcast. Remind me of what it's called. It's
called Why Do Men?
Why Do Men? Brilliant title.
Great for SEO as well if you're a geeky marketing person. And that was But that's kind of where we started with it because amazingly, like when you put in "Why do men" into Google, some of the top results are absolutely hilarious.
Okay.
They're like, "Why do men have nipples?"
Yeah. Why do men ghost? Why do men ignore me? Why do men never come back to my second date?
Exactly, that's the thing.
Things,
And the whole idea with the first series is it's why do men in the context of dating and relationships, right? So crowdsourced topics, and I really encourage anyone, if they have a topic, to send it through. And then the idea is we bring on board experts to answer some of the more tricky topics that I'm not in a position to answer. So
that's a brilliant, a brilliant concept.
Well,
what do you think the next 12 months looks like for Tom?
Yeah, so I've got a bit of a plan. I mean, I do have my PR comms background and that stuff will take up a lot of my time over the next 6 months. And it is very, very difficult. Like, this is one thing that I always say to the people that are listening that want to start up a side hustle or something different, is balancing it around your day job is really hard. So I've just gone down to 4 days a week in my day job. And what I'm doing in that stuff at the moment is helping a PR agency set up a social media offering. Then I'm doing some work with a FMCG brand doing some sports sponsorship stuff for the Women's Euros.
Brilliant.
And so like there's loads of stuff that I'm working on that side, but it's so hard to balance it because like I'm shooting content now. I took a couple of months off after the show and that was awesome, but now I'm back to the day job, and so I'm having to shoot content in the evenings, at the weekends, and then you're like, right, I've got the pod, and then I've got a couple of brand things happening, and then I don't know how you balance it. And I'm saying this as a single man, right? Like, imagine if you're a parent. Like,
That's me.
Yeah, right.
Single mum.
Exactly. Well, yeah, amazing. And so it is really, really hard. But, you know, like, I know you're going to ask me for my bit of advice later. But,
I just rolled onto that one. I didn't ask at the beginning. I was going to ask. So at the beginning of the show, I always ask ordinarily the piece of advice. I call it the most unordinary or extraordinary piece of advice. Really, it's a piece of advice that maybe you've carried with you or that you use on a day-to-day and you kind of home back in on. Yeah. So I don't have a very sweet, concise anecdote for you, but I'll give you an insight. Like, I am a perfectionist and I want everything done perfectly. And that's wrong. Like, it's bad to be a perfectionist. I know it's that classic, like, tell me about your bad traits in an interview question. But the thing that I always do is, like, even with a podcast or with my social media content, I want it to look perfect before I put it out. Don't do that. Just fucking do it. Just do it. Because, like, with anything in life, it's testing and learning and failing, which makes you better at stuff. 100%, yeah.
And honestly, with social, like, I was like, right, I need to buy all this camera equipment and lighting and stuff because I want my videos to look amazing. And then the ones that have banged have been the ones where I'm walking around the park and it's pissing it down with rain and I'm shooting stuff on my phone, just talking to the camera. Like, so do not worry too much. You can learn that stuff later. But if you feel like you have a message, put it out there. Like, what's the worst that can happen? Yeah, and I think that is, you know, completely the way forward for and I do think it's that is a mentality point thing as well. Yeah. Like, you've got to get yourself in that kind of frame of mind of just do it. Exactly. Whether that is, you know, booking the trip away, you know, going away to Europe for a year and building your camper van. If it is changing career, if it is going on a date. Exactly. Just do it. Just do it. Just do it. That's also Nike's... Nike's slogan, It's almost like they thought of it before. Yeah, I think he did. Clever. Did you? Well. So, okay, one last question then. Would you ever go back on a reality programme? If it was a rewind and do it again without knowing what I know now, then but I wouldn't do another dating show. And the reason for that is because I wasn't fully attuned to how much of it is edited and how they can really kind of change a lot of your storyline. And whilst it was a positive net experience for me because I am where I am now, I found the experience, in particularly when the wedding episode came out, really, really difficult. Because it saw kind of you basically jilting. Which was not. It wasn't the case at all. It was a mutual no, and we've both got on record, and I've said that a few times since. But so that was kind of the difficult thing, really. But I'd consider other telly, but maybe stuff which aligns a bit more with my values and giving some good back into the world. Okay, watch this space then. Yeah, exactly. Who knows? Yeah, that's it. Watch me on Homes Under the Hammer this time next week. What about SOS? So, I'd love to do that. The SAS Who Dares Wins. I'd love to do that. Hit me up. Ant Middleton, whatever it is. There you go. You heard it here first. Next year, next season. Well, Tom, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me on Anything But Ordinary. And you are exceptionally anything but ordinary. Thank you. I'm sure your journey will continue in that fashion as well. Thanks. I appreciate that. Thanks so much for tuning in to Anything But Ordinary. I hope the conversation gave you a little inspiration, maybe a new perspective, or just reminded you there's no such thing as a straight path when it comes to success. If you love what you heard, it would mean the world if you could follow, subscribe, or leave a little review. It really helps us keep sharing these incredible stories. And if you want to see more behind the scenes or get in touch, all the info you need is in the show notes. Until next time, keep being curious, keep challenging the ordinary, and remember, the most interesting lives rarely follow the rules.